Have you ever felt invisible in a crowd? Imagine being in the most elegant place in the city, surrounded by luxury and laughter, while carrying a basket of roses that no one wants to buy. That was Raquel's reality every night, until a mysterious man looked up and spoke words that would change her destiny forever. Night fell over Mexico City like a velvet black cloak, and in the heart of the Zona Rosa, the restaurant La Terraza del Sol shone like a jewel among modern buildings. Golden lights illuminated the indoor garden tables, where elegant couples toasted with red wine and laughed under artificial stars hanging from the glass ceiling. The aroma of gourmet food mingled with expensive perfumes, and the sound of a violin created an atmosphere of romance and exclusivity. Amid this world of glamour, a slender figure moved with discreet, almost invisible steps. It was Raquel, 24 years old, with her wicker basket full of red roses that seemed brighter than any jewel in the place. Her simple light brown dress contrasted with the designer suits around her, and her worn-out shoes made little noise on the marble floor. No one turned to look at her. No one stopped. To them, she was just part of the decor, as common as the napkins or candelabras. Raquel approached the table, where a young couple celebrated their anniversary. The man wore an impeccable gray suit, and the woman sported a red dress that cost more than everything Raquel earned in 3 months. With a soft, timid voice, barely audible over the music, Raquel asked, "Would you like a rose for the occasion? They're fresh, cut this morning." The woman didn't even lift her eyes from her cell phone, where she was checking photos she just posted on social media. The man waved his hand as if shooing away an annoying fly, and said sharply, "No, thanks. We already have enough decoration here." Raquel smiled sadly, nodded, and moved on. She had long ago learned that rich people weren't always generous, and that money didn't guarantee a kind heart. But each rejection stung like a small invisible wound, and tonight she had accumulated too many. She then headed to another table, where a group of friends celebrated one of their birthdays. Silver balloons floated above their heads, and a tower of champagne glasses glittered under the light. Raquel took a deep breath, gathered the little courage she had left, and offered her flowers again. "Good evening, ladies. Would you like to take a rose home? They're very pretty and fragrant." One of the women, with platinum blonde hair and long nails decorated with rhinestones, looked her up and down with contempt. "Roses, seriously? This is a 5-star restaurant, not a street market," she said in a shrill, mocking voice, sparking laughter from her friends. Another added, "Besides, roses are so common. We prefer imported orchids." The laughter echoed in Raquel's ears like bells of humiliation. She felt heat rise to her neck, her cheeks flushing with shame. She clutched the basket to her chest and murmured an almost inaudible sorry before quickly walking away. But what Raquel didn't know was that someone had watched the entire scene from the farthest corner of the restaurant. Seated at a table by the window, surrounded by candles that barely lit his face, was a man who didn't belong to this world of superficial laughter and vanity. His name was Leonardo Alvarez, and only 26 years old, he already owned one of the country's most successful hotel chains. He wore a simple yet elegant black suit, free of the ostentation others of his status often displayed. His dark brown hair was combed back in a casual style, and his green eyes held a depth few dared to meet. He had come to this place because the food was recommended, but the meal didn't matter to him at all. He was there because he didn't know where else to be, because his life was a succession of business meetings, signed contracts, and a deep loneliness no luxury could fill. Leonardo watched as Raquel moved between tables with dignity despite the rejection. He noticed a slight tremble in her hands as she held the basket, and how her brown eyes reflected a mix of hope and resignation. There was something about her that moved him, something genuine amid so much falseness. When a woman in the crimson dress approached Raquel and roughly pushed the flower basket, causing some to fall to the floor, Leonardo felt a surge of indignation that struck him like lightning. The woman shouted, "Look what you did! You almost knocked over my designer bag." As Raquel hurriedly knelt to pick up the fallen roses, apologizing repeatedly with a broken voice, the entire restaurant seemed oblivious to the humble young woman's suffering. But Leonardo couldn't stay silent. Not this time. He set his wine glass on the table, adjusted his jacket, and with a firm, serene voice that cut through the restaurant's noise, He spoke words that would change everything. "Miss of the Flowers, come here, please." Raquel lifted her head from the floor, the gathered roses trembling in her arms, and searched for the source of the voice. At the back of the room, by the window overlooking the city lights, stood he, a young man with a calm yet imposing presence, gazing at her with an intensity she had never felt before. It wasn't a look of pity or mockery. It was something different, something that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time that night. With weak legs and a racing heart, Raquel slowly stood up. Some people turned to look with curiosity, wondering what this elegant man wanted with a flower seller. The woman in the crimson dress huffed in annoyance and returned to her table, muttering about ridiculous spectacles. But Raquel didn't care. She could only see the man with green eyes who had called her. She walked toward him with unsteady steps, feeling every gaze in the restaurant fixed on her back. Leonardo didn't rise from his chair when she reached his table. Not because he was rude, but because he didn't want to intimidate her further. He simply looked at her calmly, waiting for her to be ready to speak. Raquel stopped in front of him, clutching her basket as if it were her only protection in the world. "Yes, sir. Would you like to buy a rose?" she asked in a soft, almost whispered voice, her hands still trembling. Leonardo noticed the small cuts on her fingers, likely from rose thorns. He also saw the dark circles under her eyes, a sign of sleepless nights. And in that moment, something inside him broke. He didn't know why, but this unknown young woman had touched a part of his soul he thought was dead. He took a deep breath, smiled slightly, and with a voice as firm as it was tender, he replied, "I don't want one rose. I want them all." The silence that followed was deafening. Raquel blinked several times, confused. "Oh, all the roses," she stammered. Leonardo nodded. "Yes, all the ones you have in that basket." Raquel's world began to spin. No one, absolutely no one, had ever bought more than 2 roses from her in a single night, and that only on her best days. She usually sold 5 or 6 throughout her shift if she was lucky, but this man was offering to buy the 32 roses she had left. It was impossible. It had to be a cruel joke, another form of disguised humiliation. "Sir, I don't understand why you would do that," she asked, her voice breaking, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Leonardo leaned back in his chair, clasped his hands on the table, and looked at her with seriousness that left no room for doubt. "Because someone who works this hard deserves at least one person to tell her that her effort is worth it, and because tonight you've been treated with a cruelty no one should have to endure." Raquel felt her knees weaken. The tears she had held back all night began to roll down her cheeks. It was too much kindness, too much tenderness after so much rejection. Leonardo pulled a black leather wallet from the inside pocket of his jacket and took out several bills. Without counting them, he placed them on the table. It was far more than a flower's cost, probably 3 or 4 times the price. "Take this and keep the change. Use it for whatever you need," he said naturally, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Raquel stared at the money with wide eyes. She had never seen so many bills together. With that money, she could buy her grandmother's medicines for the whole month, pay the overdue rent, maybe even buy decent food, but the emotion was overwhelming. Her exhausted body, worn out from weeks of relentless work, sleepless nights caring for her sick grandmother, and days walking under the sun selling flowers, finally gave out. Thank you, sir. God bless you," she whispered with the little strength she had left. And then, before Leonardo could react, Raquel's legs gave way. The basket hit the floor with a dull thud. The roses scattered like a red carpet over marble, and she collapsed forward, fading into darkness. Leonardo jumped to his feet, his instincts reacting faster than his mind. He caught Raquel just before her head hit the floor, holding her in his arms with a gentleness that surprised even himself. The entire restaurant erupted in murmurs. Some diners stood up, alarmed. Others pulled out their phones to record the moment as if it were another spectacle of the night. But Leonardo paid no attention to any of them. He only looked at Raquel's pale face, unconscious in his arms, so fragile and vulnerable that he felt a lump in his throat. "Someone call an ambulance!" he shouted with an authoritative voice that sent several waiters running immediately. But Leonardo knew he couldn't wait. With a swift movement, He lifted Raquel into his arms as if she weighed nothing, ignoring the scattered roses and the bills on the table. "My car is outside," he said to the worried manager who approached. "I'll handle it." Without waiting for a response, he strode out of the restaurant with firm, determined steps. The night had just begun, and Leonardo Alvarez had no idea that this young woman with the roses was about to change his life forever. Leonardo crossed the restaurant parking lot with Raquel unconscious in his arms, feeling the light weight of her body contrast with the gravity of the moment. The neon lights of Zona Rosa flickered around him, but he could only focus on her weak breathing. His driver, an older man named Joaquin, who had worked for him for years, opened the back door of the black sedan with eyes wide with concern. "Don Leonardo, what happened? Should I call someone?" he asked as he helped settle Raquel into the seat. Leonardo climbed in beside her, cradling her head on his lap to prevent her from bumping it with the car's movements. "To the nearest hospital. Joaquin, quickly but carefully," he ordered with a firm yet calm voice. The driver nodded and sped off immediately. As the car glided through the city's illuminated streets, Leonardo watched Raquel's face under the dim interior light. She had delicate features, almost like an old painting, and her lips murmured inaudible words in her unconscious state. "Grandma, sorry, I need the medicines," Raquel whispered in her sleep, her forehead beaded with cold sweat. Leonardo felt a pang in his chest hearing those fragmented words. He didn't know her full story, but those few words revealed a universe of sacrifice and pain. Gently, he took a clean handkerchief from his pocket and softly wiped the sweat from her forehead. "Calm down. Everything will be okay," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. The car turned a corner, and the lights of Hospital Angeles shone ahead like a beacon of hope. Joaquin stopped the vehicle right at the emergency entrance, and before he could get out to open the door, Leonardo was already outside with Raquel in his arms. Two nurses smoking near the entrance tossed their cigarettes aside when they saw him and rushed to help. "We need a gurney here," one shouted as the other held the automatic doors open. Leonardo hurried inside, his shoes echoing against the shiny linoleum floor of the hospital. A young doctor in a white coat approached immediately, assessing the situation with quick, professional eyes. "What happened? How long has she been unconscious?" she asked, guiding Leonardo toward an empty emergency room. "About 10 minutes ago. She was at a restaurant, seemed exhausted, and suddenly fainted," Leonardo explained as he carefully placed Raquel on the gurney the nurses had prepared. The doctor began checking her vital signs, placing an oximeter on her finger and checking her pulse. "Is she a relative?" she asked without looking up, focused on her work. Leonardo hesitated for a second. "No, but I'll take responsibility for all necessary medical expenses," he replied firmly. The doctor glanced at him briefly, surprised by the statement, but nodded professionally. "Understood. I need you to wait outside while we examine her. It won't take long." Leonardo left the room with slow steps, feeling a strange reluctance to leave the stranger who, unknowingly, had stirred something deep within him. The waiting area smelled of disinfectant and cold coffee. Leonardo sat in one of the orange plastic chairs that creaked under his weight. Around him, other people waited with worried expressions. A mother rocking a crying baby, an older man with a bandaged hand, a young couple embracing in silence. He felt out of place in his expensive suit, but for the first time in years, that didn't matter to him. He pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the screen without really seeing anything. There were 23 missed calls from his assistant, 12 messages about important meetings, and 3 urgent emails from foreign investors. But none of those mattered to him at that moment. He could only think of the words Raquel had murmured. "Grandma, sorry, the medicines." How long had this young woman been carrying such a heavy burden alone? How many sleepless nights had she spent selling flowers to care for someone she loved? Leonardo knew success, wealth, the power to sign multimillion-dollar contracts, but he had never known this kind of selfless, sacrificial love. 30 minutes passed, feeling like hours. Finally, the doctor emerged from the emergency room, removing her disposable gloves and breathing a sigh of relief. "How is she?" Leonardo asked, standing up immediately. The doctor smiled reassuringly. "She's stable. It was a faint due to extreme exhaustion and malnutrition. I'd say she's gone days, maybe weeks, without eating well or getting enough rest. Her body simply shut down. Leonardo clenched his fists, feeling a mix of relief and anger. Anger at a world that forced noble people to destroy themselves with work. "Can I see her?" he asked. The doctor nodded. "Yes, but she's still asleep. We've hooked her up to N4 for hydration and given her something to rest. She'll probably wake up in 1 or 2 hours. You can go in if you'd like." Leonardo walked toward the room with a pounding heart. Upon entering, he saw Raquel lying on the gurney, now in a light blue hospital gown, her dark hair spread over the white pillow. She looked so fragile, so far removed from the noisy world of the restaurant. He approached slowly and sat in the chair beside the gurney. And there he stayed, watching over the sleep of a stranger who, without words or promises, had just taught him the true meaning of strength. The clock on the wall read 2 a.m. when Raquel began to stir slightly. Her eyelids fluttered like trapped butterflies, and a soft moan escaped her lips. Leonardo, who had been scrolling through his phone without paying real attention, set aside immediately and leaned forward. "Raquel," he said softly, unsure if that was her name, but feeling the need to call her something. Her eyes opened slowly, confused at first, adjusting to the fluorescent ceiling light. She looked around in a panic, the white walls, the beeping machines, the four in her arm. She didn't recognize the place. Her breathing quickened. "Where am I? What happened?" she asked in a hoarse voice, tried to sit up suddenly. Leonardo extended his hands in a calming gesture. Calm down. Calm down, you're in the hospital. You fainted at the restaurant, and I brought you here. You're safe." Raquel stared at him, gradually recognizing him. The man of the roses, the one who had bought all her flowers. Tears welled up in her eyes again, but this time not from gratitude, but from desperation. "The hospital? No, no, no. I can't pay for a hospital. How much does this cost? Oh my God, I don't have money to pay." Her voice broke in a sob that tore at his soul. She tried to rip the four from her arm, but Leonardo gently but firmly held her hand. "You don't have to pay anything. I've already taken care of it," he said calmly. Raquel shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You can't do that. You don't know me. You don't know who I am. Why would you do this for me?" Her voice trembled with disbelief and shame. Leonardo fell silent for a moment, searching for the right words. He himself didn't fully understand why he had done all this. He only knew he couldn't have left her collapsed in that restaurant. "Because everyone deserves someone to help them when they need it most," he finally replied. "And because something tells me you've been helping others for a long time without asking for anything in return." Raquel closed her eyes tightly, letting the tears flow freely. For years, she had carried everything alone. The care of her grandmother Consuelo, the unpaid bills, the endless nights selling flowers at restaurants and parties where she was treated worse than furniture. She had never had anyone to care for her. And now this stranger, this elegant man who seemed to step out of a magazine, was there watching over her sleep as if she were someone important. "My grandmother," she murmured suddenly, opening her eyes in alarm. "I have to go to her. She's alone at home. She's sick. She needs her medicines at 6 a.m. She moved to get up again, but her body was still too weak. Leonardo stopped her gently. "Where does your grandmother live? I'll have someone go care for her until you can leave here," he offered without hesitation. Raquel looked at him as if he had spoken in another language. "Would you really do that?" she whispered, hardly believing it. Leonardo nodded and pulled out his phone. "Give me the address." Raquel hesitated. It was dangerous to give her address to a stranger, but something in this man's green eyes told her she could trust him. With a trembling voice, she gave him the address of her small home in the San Maria la Ribera neighborhood, a humble area north of the city. Leonardo dialed a number and spoke briefly in a low voice. When he hung up, he looked at Raquel calmly. "My driver, Joaquin, will go right now. He's a trustworthy man. He's been with me for 15 years. He'll bring whatever medicines your grandmother needs and stay there until dawn to ensure she's okay." Raquel brought her hands to her mouth, stifling a sob of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you, sir. I don't even—" Leonardo smiled for the first time that night, a small but genuine smile. "My name is Leonardo. Leonardo Alvarez. And you don't have to thank me, just rest. Raquel tried to smile through her tears. I'm Raquel, Raquel Moreno. The doctor entered at that moment to check Raquel's vital signs again. As she worked, Leonardo stood to give her space. The doctor adjusted the floor, took notes on her digital tablet, and finally spoke. Raquel, you need to stay here at least until tomorrow noon. Your body needs to recover. And when you leave, you'll have to rest for several days and eat well. No working for at least a week. Raquel opened her mouth to protest, but Leonardo intervened before she could. I'll make sure of it. The doctor looked at him with approval and left the room, leaving them alone again. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that arises when two unknown souls meet in a moment that will change their lives forever. Leonardo sat back in the chair. Rest, Raquel. I'll stay here until you wake up tomorrow. Raquel looked at him with eyes shining with emotion. Why are you doing all this for me? She asked again in a whisper. Leonardo looked at her with a depth that pierced all barriers. Because tonight, when I saw you selling those roses with such dignity despite the contempt, you reminded me that goodness still exists in this world. And that's something I had forgotten long ago. 5 days after that night in the hospital, Leonardo found himself doing something he never imagined, looking up Raquel's address in his phone's contacts. He had obtained the information from her medical records, something he technically shouldn't have done, but his assistant had connections everywhere and asked no questions. During those 5 days, Leonardo couldn't focus on any business meetings. The Japanese investors who had flown from Tokyo to finalize a hotel expansion contract noticed his distraction. His partners murmured among themselves that something was off with the boss, that he wasn't his usual self. And they were right. Every night before bed, Leonardo saw Raquel's face in his mind. Her brown eyes full of dignity, her shy smile, the way she had murmured thanks even on the brink of collapse. He didn't understand what was happening to him. A man who had dated models and successful businesswomen, who had turned down marriage proposals from high society women, now couldn't stop thinking about a flower seller he barely knew. It was absurd, illogical, but it was real. That Saturday afternoon, Leonardo told Joaquin to drive him to the address he had noted. The driver glanced at him through the rear-view mirror with a knowing smile, but said nothing. He had known his boss since he was a 20-year-old building his first hotel, and had never seen him so unsettled over a woman. They crossed the city from Polanco to Santa Maria la Ribera, and the contrast between the two worlds was like moving from a high-definition movie to a faded photograph. Mansions with perfect gardens gave way to two-story houses with peeling paint, corner stores with hand-painted signs, and taco stands where people lined up for lunch. Leonardo watched it all through the window with fascination. He had grown up in a similar neighborhood before his company took off, but it had been years since he'd walked these streets. He had forgotten what real life was like, the life without filters or luxuries. When the car stopped in front of a small pale yellow house with improvised pots in the windows, Leonardo felt a knot in his stomach. What would he say? How would he justify showing up at her house unannounced? He stepped out with a prepared excuse in mind. He'd say he needed flowers for a company event. It was believable, professional, and didn't reveal the truth, that he simply needed to see her again. He knocked on the worn wooden door and waited, feeling his heart beat faster than usual. He heard slow steps on the other side, and then the door opened. Raquel appeared in the doorway, dressed in a simple white blouse and faded jeans, her dark hair tied back in a ponytail. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw him. "Leonardo," she said with disbelief, as if seeing a ghost. He smiled nervously, something that rarely happened to him. "Hello, Raquel. I hope I'm not bothering you. I needed to talk to you about something." She blinked several times, still processing that the man who had saved her was standing at the door of her humble home. "No, you're not bothering me at all. Come in, please," she said, stepping aside. Leonardo entered the small living room, where every inch of space was filled with love. Family photos in cheap frames, an old but clean sofa, and flowers everywhere. Roses, carnations, daisies, and improvised vases made from recycled glass bottles. It was a humble indoor garden bursting with beauty. From an adjacent room, an elderly, warm voice asked, Who is it, my dear? Raquel smiled toward the direction. It's a friend, Grandma, the man I told you about. A woman with snow-white hair, wrapped in a colorful knitted shawl, appeared slowly, leaning on a cane. Her face was lined with wrinkles that told stories of a long, hard life, but her black eyes sparkled with vitality that defied age. So you're the angel who saved my granddaughter, Dona Consuelo said with a smile that lit up the room. Leonardo approached with respect and gently took the old woman's hand. I'm no angel, ma'am. I just did what any decent person would do. The grandmother laughed with a crystalline sound. Oh, son, if you only knew how many decent people in this world do nothing, but you did, and for that, you'll always be welcome in this house. Raquel watched the scene with a shy smile, feeling her heart race as she saw this powerful man treat her grandmother with such tenderness. Don't forget to like this video and comment, God is good, if you're enjoying this incredible story. Leonardo sat on the sofa at Dona Consuelo's insistence, and Raquel served him hibiscus water in mismatched glasses. The conversation flowed with surprising naturalness. Leonardo explained with his rehearsed excuse that he needed flowers for the opening of his new hotel and had thought of her. Raquel, excited but trying to maintain professional calm, showed him the few flowers she had at the moment. It's not much, but I can get more for the date you need, she said with hope shining in her eyes. Leonardo watched her every move, the way she touched the flowers with care, as if they were living creatures deserving respect. As they discussed colors, arrangements, and quantities, Dona Consuelo observed from her chair with a wise smile. She had lived long enough to recognize when two souls were destined to meet, and in that moment, seeing how her granddaughter and this young man looked at each other when they thought the other wasn't watching, she knew God was writing a new story for her family. But just as Leonardo was about to leave, promising to return soon to finalize details, Dona Consuelo let out a groan of pain and clutched her chest. Her face turned pale as paper, and her lips murmured a word that froze Raquel's blood. My dear, my heart. Time stopped for an eternal second. Raquel ran to her grandmother, but her trembling hands could barely hold her. Grandma, Grandma, look at me. Don't fall asleep, she cried desperately as tears streamed from her eyes. Dona Consuelo breathed with difficulty, each inhalation sounding like a painful wheeze. Leonardo reacted with the speed of someone accustomed to making decisions under pressure. Raquel, help me lift her. My car is outside. We'll take her to a clinic right now. Together, they carefully lifted the elderly woman, who had already lost some consciousness. Her eyes opened and closed with difficulty, murmuring prayers in a low voice. Our Father who art in heaven, protect my girl, she whispered with a broken voice. Raquel sobbed uncontrollably as they descended the front steps. Neighbors began peering out of windows. Some came out to offer help. Dona Consuelo, shouted a woman from the house next door. We'll pray for her. But there was no time for words. Leonardo settled the grandmother in the back seat with Raquel holding her, and before the door closed, he shouted to Joaquin, to Hospital Angeles now, and don't stop at any traffic lights. The car sped through the streets like a black arrow, dodging afternoon traffic. Joaquin drove with surgical precision, knowing every shortcut in the city. Inside the vehicle, Raquel cradled her grandmother's head in her lap, stroking her white hair while praying aloud. God, please don't take her from me. She's all I have. Please, Lord, hear my prayer. Leonardo, seated in the front passenger seat, was already on the phone with the hospital director, Dr. Ramirez. It's Leonardo Alvarez. I'm on my way with an elderly patient in cardiac crisis. I need everything ready. Emergency room, on-call cardiologist, the best you have. The voice on the other end confirmed that everything would be prepared. Leonardo hung up and turned to Raquel. She'll be okay, I promise, he said with conviction he needed to believe himself. Raquel looked at him with red, swollen eyes. Why are you helping us so much? I don't understand. We're nobody to you. Leonardo felt a pang in his heart. That's not true. You are... He stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. What was she to him? A stranger who had touched his soul, a light in his darkness. He didn't have the words yet. They reached the hospital in 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. The medical team was waiting at the entrance with a gurney. Nurses and doctors immediately surrounded Dona Consuelo, connecting portable monitors and administering oxygen as they rushed her inside. Blood pressure 160/100. Arrhythmia detected. A nurse shouted as they sped through the white hallways. Raquel tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped her. "Miss, you need to wait here. The doctors will do everything they can." Raquel stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, trembling from head to toe, watching the double doors of the emergency room close behind her grandmother. She slid down the wall to sit on the cold floor, cry with a pain that tore at her chest. Leonardo knelt beside her and, without thinking, hugged her. She clung to him like a shipwrecked person to a life preserver, burying her face in his chest and sobbing uncontrollably. "I can't lose her. She's all I have. She raised me since I was 5 when my parents died in that accident. She's my mom, my dad, my everything." Her voice choked on tears. Leonardo held her tightly, feeling her tears soak his expensive shirt. But that didn't matter to him at all. "You won't lose her. She has to pull through. She has to see the future that awaits you," he said with a firm voice. They remained like that for what seemed an eternity, embraced on the hospital floor, two strangers united by fate and pain. Gradually, Raquel's crying subsided into small, interrupted sobs. Leonardo helped her stand and guided her to the waiting area, where he sat her in a more comfortable chair. "I'll get water and something to eat." "You haven't eaten all day," he said gently. Raquel nodded weakly, too exhausted to protest. As Leonardo walked away, she closed her eyes and prayed silently, asking God for a miracle. The hours passed slowly. Leonardo returned with sandwiches and coffee, gently urging Raquel to eat at least a little. He sat beside her, and at some point in the early morning, when exhaustion overcame Raquel, she fell asleep leaning on his shoulder. He didn't move, staying still to avoid waking her. When the first light of dawn began to filter through the hospital windows, a doctor in a green gown emerged from the emergency room. Leonardo gently woke Raquel. "Raquel, the doctor's here." She sat up abruptly, her heart racing. Both stood and approached the doctor, who greeted them with a tired but reassuring smile. "The patient is stable. She had a severe arrhythmia, but we managed to control it. However, she'll need to stay hospitalized for at least a week and take cardiac medication for life." Raquel brought her hands to her mouth, letting out a sob of relief. "Can I see her?" she asked with a trembling voice. The doctor nodded. "Yes, but she's sedated. She'll wake up in a few hours." Raquel entered the room with shaky steps. There was her grandmother, connected to machines but breathing peacefully, her face at rest. She approached and took her wrinkled hand, kissing it tenderly. "Thank you, God, thank you," she whispered through tears. Leonardo watched from the doorway, moved by the scene. When Raquel turned to him, her eyes shone with gratitude so deep it needed no words. But it was Dona Consuelo who, upon waking hours later and seeing Leonardo seated on the other side of the bed, spoke the words that would change everything. "You saved more than a life, son. You saved her dream, too. And now I know God put you in our path for a reason." The days following Dona Consuelo's hospitalization marked the beginning of something neither of them had planned, but both felt growing with each encounter. Leonardo began visiting the hospital every afternoon after his meetings, always with some excuse. He brought fresh fruit for grandmother, books for Raquel to pass the time, or simply showed up saying he was in the area. But the truth was simpler and more complex at the same time. He couldn't stop thinking about them. Raquel, for her part, tried to maintain a respectful distance. She felt deeply grateful, but also ashamed of not being able to repay such generosity. Every time Leonardo paid for something or solved a problem with a phone call, she felt the debt grow like an insurmountable mountain. "I shouldn't keep accepting his help," she told her grandmother when they were alone. But Dona Consuelo, wise as only those who live many years can be, smiled tenderly and replied, "My dear, sometimes God sends us angels when we need them most. Don't reject blessings out of pride." Raquel knew she was right, but her heart was torn between gratitude, shame, and something more she didn't dare name. One Thursday afternoon, while Raquel arranged the fresh flowers she had brought to brighten her grandmother's room, Leonardo arrived earlier than usual. He carried 2 steaming coffees and a bag of sweetbread from a traditional downtown bakery. "I thought you might need some energy," he said with that soft smile he had started showing only with her. Raquel accepted the coffee with trembling hands, not from the cold, but from his closeness. They sat together in the plastic chairs by the window, while Dona Consuelo dozed peacefully after her medication. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was charged with unspoken words. Leonardo looked out the window at the city, sprawling beneath the gray afternoon sky. "You know, I've been building hotels since I was 22. I've traveled the world. I've closed multimillion-dollar contracts. I've met important people from every country," he began in a measured voice. Raquel watched him in profile, observing the serious line of his jaw, the way his green eyes reflected something akin to melancholy. "But I've never felt as alive as I have these past few days, sitting in a hospital drinking coffee with someone I barely know." Raquel felt her heart skip. She lowered her gaze to her cup, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "I don't know what's happening either," she admitted in a low voice, so soft it was barely audible over the hum of the machines. "But I feel it's not right. You live in a different world from mine. You have an important life, meetings, businesses, and I'm just a girl who sells flowers on the street." Leonardo turned to her with such intensity that she had to meet his gaze. "Don't say that. Don't ever say you're just something. Raquel, in my world, everyone wants something from me. Contracts, investments, connections. But you look at me like I'm just a man. Not the owner of a company. Not someone with money. Just Leonardo." His voice cracked slightly at the end, revealing a vulnerability he rarely showed. Raquel felt tears prick her eyes. "That's because I don't know how to be any other way," she whispered. "To me, you're the man who saved me when no one else saw me. The man who carried my grandmother and stayed up all night in a hospital. That's what I see when I look at you." Weeks passed, and Dona Consuelo was discharged with strict instructions for rest and care. Leonardo insisted they stay at his house for a few days until she was stronger, but Raquel refused outright. "You've done too much for us already. We need to get back to our life," she said with determination, though her voice carried a hint of sadness. Leonardo didn't press further, but he didn't disappear either. He began visiting them at their small Santa Maria la Ribera home with any pretext. Sometimes he arrived saying he needed more flowers for his hotels. Other times he simply showed up with hot food or leftover medicines. Dona Consuelo amused herself watching this powerful man invent increasingly elaborate excuses just to see her granddaughter. And Raquel, though she tried to keep up appearances, began to look forward to those visits with a sweet anxiety that had her checking the clock every hour. Their conversations grew longer and deeper. They talked about their dreams, their fears, their stories. Leonardo told her about his tough childhood before success, about how he had built his empire from scratch with hard work and sacrifice. Raquel shared her memories of her parents, her pain at losing them so young, her infinite gratitude toward her grandmother. One Friday evening, while helping Raquel water the plants in the small backyard garden, Leonardo stopped and looked at her seriously. The sky was painted with oranges and pinks, and the warm air carried the scent of flowers. "Raquel, I need to tell you something," he began with a voice more nervous than she had ever heard from him. Raquel set the watering can on the ground, feeling her heart beat faster. "Tell me," she whispered. Leonardo took a deep breath. "These last 2 months have been the most important of my life, and I know we come from different worlds. I know all this started in a strange way, but I can't pretend I only come here for the flowers or out of courtesy." He took a step closer, and Raquel could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I come because when I'm with you, I'm the best version of myself. I come because your laugh is the most beautiful sound I've heard. I come because—" He stopped, searching for the right words. Raquel had tears in her eyes, waiting, holding her breath. From the kitchen window, Dona Consuelo watched the scene with a wise grandmother's smile, praying silently for her granddaughter to finally let love into her life. And in that moment, as the sun set behind the buildings and the first stars began to shine, Leonardo gently took Raquel's hand in his and spoke the words she had dreamed of hearing but never dared to wish for. "I come because I've fallen in love with you. Tears rolled down Raquel's cheeks like rivers of long-contained emotion. Her lower lip trembled as she tried to process what she had just heard. Leonardo, the man who had entered her life like a ray of light in the darkness, had just confessed something she felt growing in her own heart but feared to acknowledge. "Leonardo, she began, but her voice broke. He squeezed her hand gently, giving her time. "You don't have to say anything now. I just wanted you to know. I wanted to be honest with you because you deserve honesty," he said tenderly. But Raquel shook her head, wiping her tears with her free hand. "No, I do have to say it because I've fallen for you too. Since that night at the restaurant, when you looked at me like I mattered, when you bought my flowers not out of pity but out of kindness, I fell for every gesture, every visit, every kind word." Her voice was a whisper laden with truth. Leonardo felt as if a huge weight lifted from his chest. He pulled her toward him and hugged her tightly, feeling her return the embrace with equal intensity. From that day, their relationship shifted from a cautious friendship to something deeper and more genuine. Leonardo continued his business life, but now every decision he made included Raquel in his thoughts. How could he make her dream of owning a flower shop a reality without making her feel humiliated? How could he help her without bruising her pride? He began planning in secret, using his network of contacts and business experience to create something special. Meanwhile, he visited Raquel almost daily. They dined together at the small kitchen table, where Dona Consuelo prepared traditional Mexican dishes that reminded Leonardo of his own childhood before wealth. They ate stewed tacos, drank homemade horchata, and laughed under the warm light of an old lamp. To Leonardo, those simple dinners were worth more than all the gala banquets he had attended. There in that humble house, he had found what his soul sought, a true home, not made of expensive walls, but of genuine love. Raquel, for her part, had returned to selling flowers on the streets, but with renewed energy. Now she had a clearer purpose, saving money for her own business. Leonardo had offered to help financially hundreds of times, but she always refused with sweetness but firmness. "I need to do it myself. I need to know I can achieve it with my own effort," she explained. And though it pained Leonardo to see her work so hard, he deeply respected her determination. However, what Raquel didn't know was that Leonardo was working on something that would change her life without stripping her the credit for her effort. He contacted flower suppliers, researched the floral business, and spoke with interior designers about creating a small but perfect shop. All in secret, all waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the surprise. His personal assistant, an efficient woman named Patricia, who had worked with him for years, looked at him in amazement. "Boss, in all the years I've been with you, I've never seen you so involved in something that wasn't a hotel," she commented one day. Leonardo smiled. "Because this isn't just a business, Patricia. This is love." Months passed like pages of a beautiful book. Autumn gave way to Mexico City's mild winter, and the streets filled with Christmas decorations. Leonardo and Raquel became inseparable. He accompanied her to sell flowers on weekends, carrying her basket and chatting with customers as if he'd done it all his life. The neighborhood people began to know them as a couple, and Raquel's neighbors laughed about the rich boyfriend who didn't mind getting his hands dirty. Dona Consuelo, growing stronger and healthier thanks to her medicines and care, watched the couple with infinite joy. One night, while Raquel slept, she called Leonardo to the kitchen. "Son, I want to thank you for everything you've done for us," she said with serious voice. Leonardo shook his head. "Dona Consuelo, you have nothing to thank me for. You've given me much more than I've given you." The elderly woman smiled with wisdom. "I know you're planning something big for my granddaughter. I see it in your eyes every time you look at her. I only ask one thing. Take care of her always, because she's the greatest treasure I have in this world." Leonardo took the wrinkled hand of the grandmother in his. "I promise. I'll take care of her every day of my life." The construction of Leonardo's new hotel was nearly complete. It would be the most ambitious project of his career, a luxury building in the heart of Polanco with 200 rooms, world-class restaurants, and cutting-edge technology. But what no one knew, except his inner circle, was that in the main lobby, he had designed a special space, a space still covered with white tarps, awaiting the right moment to be revealed. Every time he visited the site, Leonardo stood before that covered space and smiled, imagining Raquel's expression when she finally saw it. The hotel's opening was scheduled for 3 weeks, and he had planned every detail. He had a special dress made for Raquel in the exact color of the roses she sold. He prepared personal invitations for neighbors of Santa Maria la Ribera, including Dona Consuelo, in a place of honor. He hired the city's best musicians to entertain the night. Everything was ready. All that remained was for the day to arrive when he could give the woman he loved not just a business, but a piece of his heart turned into reality. A dream made of flowers that would bloom forever in the city's most elegant place. The night of the opening arrived under a clear sky filled with stars that seemed to shine especially for the occasion. Leonardo had sent an elegant car to pick up Raquel and Dona Consuelo, along with a note that read, "This night is special. Please honor my new hotel with your presence. I'll be waiting for you at 8 sharp." Raquel had read the note a dozen times, nervous about attending such an important event. She wore her best dress, a burgundy one she had bought years ago for a wedding and saved for special occasions. It wasn't a designer dress, but it was dignified and elegant in its own way. Dona Consuelo, for her part, wore a hand-embroidered traditional Mexican outfit that had belonged to her mother, adorned with colorful flowers on the shoulders. When the car arrived at their door, both climbed in with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The driver, Joaquin, greeted them with a knowing smile. "Don Leonardo is very excited that you're coming," he said as he drove through the illuminated streets toward Polanco. Raquel looked out the window, watching as the humble neighborhood gave way to wide avenues with modern buildings and exclusive shops. She fell out of place, but tried not to show it. When they arrived at the hotel, Raquel had to stifle a gasp of amazement. The building was impressive, a structure of glass and steel rising toward the sky like an architectural jewel, illuminated with golden lights that made every window glow. A red carpet stretched from the entrance to the street, and men in black suits welcomed guests arriving in luxury cars. Raquel felt panic. "Grandma, I don't think we should be here. Look at all these elegant people. We don't fit in," she whispered nervously. But Dona Consuelo squeezed her hand firmly. "My dear, Leonardo invited you because he wants you here, not for your dress or your money, but for who you are. Hold your head high and enter with dignity." Raquel took a deep breath and nodded. They stepped out of the car with Joaquin's help. And as they walked down the red carpet, some people turned to look with curiosity. But at that moment, Leonardo appeared at the entrance. He wore an impeccable black tuxedo that highlighted his elegant figure, but what shone most was his smile when he saw her. He walked quickly toward them and took Raquel's hand, kissing it tenderly. "You're beautiful," he whispered. She felt her knees tremble. Leonardo offered his arm to Dona Consuelo with chivalry and led them both inside the hotel. The lobby was spectacular. Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling, and music from a string quartet filling the air. There were at least 200 people in the room, businessmen, politicians, celebrities, all with champagne glasses in hand, and lively conversations. Raquel felt completely overwhelmed. Leonardo noticed her discomfort and whispered in her ear, "Breathe. Just focus on me." She nodded, trying to calm herself. After briefly greeting some important guests, Leonardo led them to the center of the lobby, where a large structure was covered with a giant white cloth. It was something big, the size of a small shop, but no one could see what was beneath. Raquel looked at Leonardo with confusion. "What is that?" she asked. He smiled mysteriously. "Something I've been preparing for months, but before I reveal it, I need to tell you something." He signaled to the musicians, who stopped playing. Silence fell over the lobby as all the guests turned to see what was happening. Leonardo took a microphone handed to him by his assistant, Patricia. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this special inauguration." Leonardo began with a clear, firm voice that echoed through the lobby. "This hotel represents years of work, dreams, and dedication. But tonight I want to talk about something more important than any building or business." He paused and looked directly at Raquel, who stood frozen with nerves. 6 months ago, I met an extraordinary woman. I met her in a restaurant selling roses with a dignity that moved my soul. That night, she taught me something I had forgotten in my world of contracts and meetings, the true value of honest effort, sacrifice for love, genuine kindness. Raquel felt tears begin to form in her eyes. The guests listened in absolute silence. Raquel Moreno, since that night my life has changed completely, and today, at the inauguration of the most important project of my career, I want to honor your dream. He signaled again, and several employees began removing the white cloth covering the mysterious structure. When the cloth fell, Raquel brought her hands to her mouth and let out a choked cry. There, in the heart of Polanco's most luxurious hotel, was a complete flower shop, glass walls with shelves full of flowers of every color, an elegant wooden counter, and above the entrance, in golden letters that gleamed under the chandelier light, a sign reading, "Roses to Raquel." Raquel's legs gave out. She knelt on the marble floor, crying uncontrollably as her hands trembled. Dona Consuelo, also crying, hugged her from behind, whispering thanks to God between tears. The guests began to clap, first timidly, then with growing enthusiasm, until the entire lobby resounded with applause. Leonardo knelt in front of Raquel, taking her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. "This is your business, Raquel. It's in your name with all the legal permits. The suppliers are already contacted, and if you want, you can start working when you're ready. But it's not charity or a gift to make you feel small. It's an investment in the talent and dedication of the hardest working woman I've ever met. You'll turn this space into something beautiful, just as you turn everything you touch." Raquel looked at him with eyes shining with tears, unable to speak. Her heart beat so hard she felt it might burst. This wasn't just a flower shop. It was a recognition of her effort, the realization of a dream that had seemed impossible for so many years. It was proof that someone believed in her, not out of pity, but out of genuine love and deep respect. Finally, she managed to speak between sobs. "Leonardo, I don't know how to thank you. This is too much." He smiled, wiping her tears with his thumbs. "You don't have to thank me, because now I need to ask you something much more important than any business or building." Leonardo stood and extended his hand to Raquel, helping her rise. She trembled from head to toe, still not understanding what more could happen in a night that had already surpassed all her dreams. The applause gradually faded until silence filled the lobby again. Pairs of eyes watched the scene with attention, some pulling out phones to record the moment. Leonardo gave a discreet signal, and from a side door a young employee emerged carrying a spectacular floral arrangement, a giant bouquet of red roses, at least 50 of them, perfectly arranged with white silk ribbons. The scent of the flowers filled the space immediately, sweet and intoxicating. Leonardo took the bouquet carefully and turned his gaze to Raquel. "Do you remember the first night we met?" he asked with an emotional voice. She nodded, unable to speak, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "That night, I bought all your roses because something inside me knew you were special, but I didn't know how deeply you'd change my life." He took a deep breath, as if about to take the most important step of his existence. And then, before the astonished gaze of everyone present, Leonardo Alvarez knelt before Raquel, holding the huge bouquet of roses in one hand. The entire lobby erupted in murmurs of surprise. Dona Consuelo brought her hands to her heart, crying openly with happiness. Raquel felt the world stop, time freezing in that perfect, unrepeatable moment. Leonardo looked up at her from below with eyes full of love, vulnerability, and hope. "Raquel Moreno," he began with a clear but emotion-laden voice. "For 6 months, you've filled my life with light, laughter, meaning. You've taught me that true wealth isn't in the buildings I construct or the money I earn, but in the moments shared with the one you love. You've shown me the beauty of simplicity, the value of sacrifice, and the power of genuine love." He paused, his eyes glistening with tears he didn't try to hide. "That night, I bought all your roses, but today I only want one thing from you." With the hand he had free, he pulled a small red velvet box from his pocket. He opened it slowly, revealing an engagement ring, a white gold band with central diamonds surrounded by small red rubies that shone like rose petals under the light. "Raquel, my love, my life, my everything, will you do me the honor of being my wife?" The silence that followed lasted barely 2 seconds, but felt like an eternity. Raquel stared at the ring, then at Leonardo, then back at the ring, as if she couldn't process the reality of what was happening. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: joy, disbelief, overflowing love. She thought of her life before meeting him. The cold night selling flowers, being rejected and ignored, the loneliness of carrying the world's weight alone. She thought of how this man had appeared like a miracle sent by God, transforming her existence with every act of kindness. And she thought of the future now stretching before her like a path of infinite possibilities. "Yes!" she shouted finally with a loud, clear voice that echoed through the lobby. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." She threw herself into Leonardo's arms, who was still kneeling, causing him to lose balance until they both ended up sitting on the marble floor, embraced and crying with happiness. The bouquet of roses fell aside, scattering red petals around them like natural confetti. The entire lobby erupted in deafening applause, shouts of joy, and whistles. The guests stood, clapping with genuine enthusiasm at the most romantic scene many had witnessed in their lives. Leonardo, still holding Raquel, took her left hand tenderly and slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for her. Because it had been. He had secretly taken the measurements of one of her rings weeks earlier, with Dona Consuelo's help. They rose together, and Leonardo kissed her for the first time in front of everyone. A long, deep kiss that sealed the promise of a shared future. The applause continued as the musicians began playing a romantic melody. Dona Consuelo approached the couple with open arms, embracing them both tightly. "My children, may God bless you always," she said between tears of joy. "I knew this would happen from the day I saw you together. True love always finds its way." The guests began approaching to congratulate them, forming a line of hugs and good wishes. Powerful businessmen shook Raquel's hand with genuine respect. Celebrities hugged her as if they'd known her all their lives. In that moment, she was no longer the poor flower seller from the humble neighborhood. She was a future wife of Leonardo Alvarez, but more importantly, she was a woman who had won a heart with her kindness and authenticity. The party continued for hours with exquisite food, live music, and emotional toasts. Near midnight, Leonardo and Raquel slipped away briefly to the upper balcony, needing a moment alone away from the crowd. The city spread out before them, millions of lights glowing in the darkness like terrestrial stars. Leonardo wrapped his arms around Raquel from behind, and she leaned into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "This is real," she whispered, looking at the ring on her finger that gleamed under the moonlight. "We're really getting married." Leonardo kissed her hair softly. "It's real, my love. As real as the roses you sold that night. As real as the love I feel every time I look at you." They stayed like that for several minutes in silence, simply enjoying each other's presence. Finally, Raquel turned to face him. "Leonardo, I need you to know something. I'm not marrying you for the hotel or the flower shop or the money. I'm marrying you because you're the noblest man I've ever met, because you make me feel valued. Because when I'm with you, I'm the happiest version of myself." Leonardo smiled with infinite tenderness. "I know, Raquel, and I'm marrying you because you taught me that success without love is an empty life. Because you are my home." They kissed again under the stars, sealing a love that had begun with a simple act of compassion and had blossomed into the most beautiful story they could write. 3 years later, Leonardo and Raquel were parents to 2 beautiful twins, Gabriel and Paloma, whose laughter filled every corner of their home. Dona Consuelo, fully recovered and radiant at 78, cared for the children with the joy of someone whose prayers had been answered in the most beautiful way. Roses de Raquel had become a thriving flower shop that employed women from the neighborhood, giving them the same opportunity Raquel once needed. One afternoon, as the family gathered in the garden of their home, filled with roses of every color, Dona Consuelo watched her grandchildren play among the flowers, Leonardo embracing Raquel with infinite tenderness, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. She approached the largest rose bush, caressed the red petals with her wrinkled hands, and with tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks, she spoke softly but with truth. "The roses of life have finally bloomed." And as the sun set, painting the sky with gold and crimson, that family united by love and faith knew that God had written for them a story more beautiful than they had ever dreamed. The story of a true love that transforms lives, overcomes any difference and blooms eternally when two hearts choose to walk together, trusting in his perfect plan. Thus ends the story of a man who bought all the roses of a humble seller and found the only treasure money could never buy. True love, the kind that transforms, heals, and blooms forever in the garden of the soul. Because in the end, what truly matters isn't the buildings we build or the money we accumulate, but the lives we touch with kindness and the love we share with those God places in our path. May this story remind you that it's never too late to show compassion, to see the invisible, to be the answer to someone's prayer. And may God bless your lives. Amen.